Today I am going to read you Merlin's Gift, a founder's Christmas story by G. Norman Lippert. And when I say founders, I do mean the founders. See if you can name them. You got it? All right. Here we go. 4 figures, 2 men and 2 women, strode into the great hall, moving through the throng of milling students who were gathering around the long tables. "It does seem that this season comes quicker every year, does it not?" The larger man with the distinctive goatee proclaimed. "One would almost believe that a certain witch's experiments with time had rather disastrous results." "You don't ever plan to let that rest, do you, Godric?" the dark-haired woman in flowing blue robes said, smiling crookedly. "I do plan to perfect that device some day, and you will surely be the first in line to thank me when I do." The statuesque woman with braided reddish hair asked, "What were you planning to call it again, Rowena? It slips my mind." "I believe the term time-turner was suggested," the severe bald wizard interjected, sneering slightly, "to which I strongly objected as a matter of literal absurdity. Nothing turns time." The dark-haired woman, Rowena Ravenclaw, bristled. "It's not a question of how the device affects time, Salazar. It is a description of the means by which the device is operated. Simple turns of the effectively enchanted element." "If I am not mistaken," Godric Gryffindor commented mildly, placing his hand on Ravenclaw's shoulder as they climbed the dais to the grandly beset table, "there is a tradition to be seen to, is there not?" "There is indeed," Hufflepuff, the tall woman in braids, agreed, seating herself. "Artifacts?" A thin young man with rather protuberant lips and bulging eyes leapt to his feet at the end of the table, where he had been awaiting the 4. His thighs bumped the table, and he lunged for his water glass as it began to topple. "Yes, Madam Hufflepuff, I am here." "Kindly regale us with our most recent feats of holiday service, if you would." Artifex produced a scroll from his robes, and, still standing, unrolled it over the table. He leaned close to it and squinted. "Beginning with the 10th year previous," he said, and began to quote, "whilst we were yet begotten of feastly goods, the founders travelled to a nearby peasant hovel for presentation of much bounty, resulting in great songs of rejoicing by the peasant, along with his family and neighbours. Slytherin duly objected. Upon the next year's holiday feast, the founders vowed a year's tribute to the support of the construction of a Muggle trades workshop. Slytherin duly objected." Yes, Gryffindor sighed, waving his hand. "But what shall we do this year? I admit I am in the mind for something a bit different. We've grown accustomed to giving out of our plenty, rather than serving out of our abilities. Is this not the very trait we teach against?" "It is indeed a trait you teach against," Slytherin replied smoothly. Ravenclaw nodded firmly, putting down her wine goblet. "Godric is quite right. It has been long since we have rallied our skills for the cause. Have we not always said that those who can do, and those who cannot—" "Please don't say it," Hufflepuff moaned. "But what shall we do, then?" At that moment, with a reverberating crash and a gust of cold air, the rear doors of the great hall burst open. A figure strode through, emerging from a cloud of swirling snowflakes. On the dais, Slytherin rolled his eyes in disdain. "Some of us simply cannot help making the dramatic entrance, can we?" He looked up as the large figure, a man in furs and a heavy hood, his golden beard covering his chest, climbed the dais. "Merliness!" Gryffindor announced, standing stiffly to greet the newcomer. "We were unaware that you were abroad in the realm. Welcome." The large man inclined his head, unsmiling. "Thank you, Founders, but I do not appear this night to partake of your holiday feast. I come with news of great importance from the king himself." "King Trufflebaum?" Ravenclaw said, her lip curling slightly. "Why should we pay any mind to the words of a mere figurehead? He is no true king of the wizarding world, and even he knows that Hogwarts College exists as its own state." "My source is not Trufflebaum." Merlin said in his low, rumbling voice. My source is the king. There was a pause, as every eye at the table fixed upon him. Finally, Hufflepuff said quietly, Kreagle? Ridiculous, Slytherin stated flatly, hoisting his wine. Children's fairy stories. King Kreagle, first king of the wizarding world, is long dead, and we all know it. Not everyone knows it, Hufflepuff corrected softly, and more believe in this tale than just children, as you are well aware. Gryffindor peered closely at the newcomer. Are you quite certain, Merlinus? It will not shock you to know that your loyalty and trustworthiness are rather a subject of speculation here. This does seem a rather tall tale. Merlin didn't blink. I do not see him often, but I know him when I do. He is rather difficult to miss. He knows of your tradition, and he presents you with a mission, one that is worthy of your powers and grace, for the most part. He slid his gaze toward Slytherin, who narrowed his eyes. At the end of the table, Artifex cleared his throat carefully. I am simply trying to keep up, Masters, but I am a bit confused. What is this legend about First King Kreagle? I admit my parents were not particularly imaginative storytellers. Gryffindor didn't take his eyes from Merlin as he spoke. King Kreagle negotiated a treaty that stopped a decades-long war between elvenkind and goblinkind. As a reward, legend says he was promised immortality on behalf of the elves. House elves? Artifex clarified, glancing up from his scroll. But they aren't exactly immortal themselves, are they? Not house elves, Ravenclaw answered. House elves are the remaining offspring of mixed goblin and elf lineage. Their forefathers chose to stay. Artifex furrowed his brow. To stay? Where? There will be time for stories later, Slytherin interjected, turning to Merlinus. You are either a trickster or a fool. Kreagle's grave may be unplottable and lost to history, but it is as real as the table before us. You may tell us of this mysterious mission of yours, my sorcerer friend, but do leave the festive embellishments out of it if you would be so kind. Merlin studied Slytherin for a moment, and then smiled cryptically and nodded. There is a young witch by the name of Gabriella, whom this night will fall prey to a very clever werewolf. This must be prevented at all costs, for this witch's line will prove very important in the ages to come. Her cottage is here, in the nearby wood, although I know not its exact location. We will know it by a broken vane next to the chimney. This is your mission? Slytherin grinned. A wild goose chase through the wintry night in search of a peasant cottage. He laughed, as if the idea were deliciously ridiculous. It is rather out of our methods, Hufflepuff acknowledged. But if Merlinus's information is accurate... Slytherin waved a hand dismissively. What is one more peasant girl? Even werewolves deserve their Christmas feast, do they not? You may doubt Merlinus Salazar, Ravenclaw said coldly, but you may not joke about the lives of others, especially at Christmas. Your heart is as cold as the night you refused to explore. Tell me this, Merlinus, Gryffindor said, leaning forward to face the large man across the table. If this mission is so imperative, why are you not sent to perform it yourself? Merlin didn't respond for several seconds. Finally, he looked away. I am sworn not to interfere with this affair. The king required my oath. And why might that be? Gryffindor asked conversationally, raising his eyebrows a bit. Perhaps you'd like to ask the king himself, Godric, Merlin answered, raising one of his own eyebrows. Gryffindor nodded, as if satisfied. I accept your mission, Merlinus, provided you yourself will join us, even if you cannot act. Perhaps, as Salazar suspects, this will prove a mere romp through the snow on a Christmas night. But what is the harm in that? Were we not just debating how best to use our unique skills for tonight's feat? Who shall join me? Ravenclaw smiled and produced her wand from her robes. I shall. It has been too long since we rode together in force.
You shall have my support as well,
Hufflepuff agreed, standing. At the end of the table, Artifex's pen scratched on the parchment of the scroll. Slytherin duly objects, he said to himself as he wrote. On the last word, his quill whipped out of his fingers and floated above the table. Rescind that, Slytherin said mildly, his wand pointing at the floating quill. With a flick, he sent the quill back down to the parchment, where it scribbled out the last line. I think I shall accompany this mission as well. I desire to see how this transpires, for Merlinus' sake. Ah, Artifex replied, grabbing unsuccessfully at his dancing quill. Very good, then. I shall record your exploits upon your return, Founders. Slytherin climbed to his feet, still training his wand on the bobbing quill. As a matter of fact, dear Bard, I think you will accompany us. You may as well record it as you see it, yes? The group began to descend the dais, Artifex in the rear, still snatching at his quill as it swooped out of his grasp. Very good, yes, he said with little enthusiasm. At the doorway, Ravenclaw stopped and turned back. She approached the end of one of the students' long tables and scanned it perfunctorily. Seeing what she was looking for, she reached with both hands and hefted it. What in the world might you be needing that for? Gryffindor asked, looking down at the rather large pumpkin in Ravenclaw's hands. I've been meaning to try something, she replied breezily, raising her chin as she passed him. Together, the group strode through the rotunda, heading for the great doors and the wintry night beyond.